We are live. Coming to you live as Lichtman Live. Say what's up to the people, Dad.
Hey, big day, big day. Lots going on.
I want to give a quick shout out to the people in the chat. Let's see who we got here today. We got a new member, Leah Janika. Thank you for being a new member. Joshua D, Will Strumeyer, Linda Fusco, and we've got members, Barry Smith, member Mike DeNicola, Mike,
All right.
and member Patrick Murray, Alex Shim, Elemental Bot, Mike C, Jim Blowers. What's up, everybody? What's up with you, Dad, huh?
We got any presidents on?
Don't see any presidents quite yet.
No, not yet. Well, I always tell our fans, like us, subscribe, and most importantly, join as members and donate.
There you go.
Keep our shoestring operation going.
So, I think I'm a little loud. I'm going to turn my mic down a little bit, but there's a lot going on in the news today, Dad, or this week, I guess, generally speaking.
Huge week.
We've got the New York 3 race that went Democratic. That's pretty big news, right, Dad?
That's big. That's
Wait, let me
really
finish
big
my
news.
list. Let me finish my list.
Oh, you got a list?
We've got, what else? We've got the Trump hush money trial set. We've got Fani Willis in the news. Wow, so much, Dad. Bradley Mustaine says that your haircut looks good, Dad.
All right. Yeah, I just got it.
There you go. All right, where do you want to start today, Pops?
Let's start with the trial. I hate calling it the hush money trial because he's not on trial for paying hush money of $130,000 to the porn star to keep her quiet about her claim that she had an affair with him. And she's got some pretty good documentation for that. And, Trump is incredibly stingy. He's not just going to give out $130,000 for nothing. It's just my opinion, but I think the evidence shows he did have an affair with her. But it doesn't matter. That's irrelevant to the trial. And the trial is not about hush money. The trial is about committing violations of New York law, election law, federal election law, and New York business law by paying $130,000 in hush money and then covering it up as though it were business expenses. And, they're talking about a 4 to 6 week trial. I think this trial could be over in a day, at least on the prosecution side. It's an open and shut case, and it's a really simple case. There is no dispute that he paid $130,000. And there is really no dispute that he covered it up as a business expense because we have the checks. We don't even need any witnesses. This case could be done on documents. And if any prosecutors from New York are out there listening, and I hope a lot of them are, my advice to you is keep it short and keep it simple. This is an extremely simple case. Don't go on forever and bore the jury. Make it happen quickly and bring it down to where the goats can get it. So it's a simple, short, compelling case to the jury. And I have no idea what Donald Trump's defense is going to be. All the things he's been yelling about, it's election interference, it's a witch hunt, it's Joe Biden going after me, although it's a state case and Joe Biden has absolutely nothing to do with it. All of these claims that he has been making, you know what value they have when he gets into court, Sam?
None.
Zero. Exactly. The judge won't even let him make any of these claims. I've been in over 110 court cases as an expert witness. And when you get into court, you have to have real evidence and legally admissible arguments. As I've said many times, Trump can huff and he can puff, but he cannot blow the courthouse down. So now this trial is scheduled just a little over a month from now, March 25th. And I have to say, as usual, the conventional pundits have got it all wrong. They say, oh, this case isn't really all that serious. It's not a big case. It's too bad that it's coming up first. Wrong, wrong, wrong. As the judge said, this is an extremely serious case involving more than 30 felony charges and potentially, although he doesn't have to be sentenced to it, 4 years in prison. This is not a trivial case. Moreover, this case is of a piece with his other cases involving election interference, because this is an election interference case. I hate calling it a hush money case, because that's not what it is. As I said, he's not on trial for the hush money. He's on trial for deceiving the American people about his payment of hush money right before the election. That's something the American people should know. He concealed them from the American people. He concealed that payment and then falsified it as though it were a business expense. And we have the checks. You've seen them on television, perhaps. It's a very, very serious case. And it's the first time in the history of the country that a former president, much less a presidential candidate, is on trial for criminal violations. So that's the first bit of very important news this week. Now, you also mentioned the New York case, right?
Did I?
Yes. What district was it? Whose seat was it previously?
Oh, now that you said the New York case, you mean the New York election.
Yes.
It was George Santos's seat, not to be confused with George DeSantos, which you often call him. George Santos, not George DeSantos.
There is no George.
There's
DeSantis.
no such person as George. Right.
You got to give me a little bit of leeway. Okay. I'm almost 77.
There you go.
And I have a little bit of dyslexia. I can identify with Joe Biden, and we may want to talk about a little bit about the egregious, disgraceful special counsel.
Wait, hold on. You have dyslexia? I never knew this. Is that true?
Well, I called him DeSantis, right? I've never had it before, but I am getting a little old.
Right. Now, okay, you're developing it is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any rate, this was a very important election. The House expelled DeSantis. Santos. See, I did it again.
Oh, my goodness.
It's very rare. The last person to be expelled, I think, was way back in 1980. He committed a serious crime. Before that, it was, folks who had committed treason during the Civil War. This is a very, very rare thing. And Santos won his election last time in 2022 handily by 8 points. And with respect to this election, pivotal election, because Republicans barely have a majority in the House, just a few seats, very important election, in one of these suburban districts that could not only decide who controls the Congress and the Senate next year, but also very important kind of district for the presidential election itself. And as I said, once again, the pollsters and the pundits had it all wrong. They were saying it's a neck and neck race. It's so tight. We can't, predict who's going to win. Whoever wins is going to win in a squeaker. And in fact, the last poll taken just a couple of days before the election showed Suozzi beating the Republican candidate by 1 point, essentially a dead heat. Did Suozzi win by just 1 point, Sam?
No.
No, he won by a whopping 8 points. It was an old-fashioned beatdown for the Democrat. In essence, the Democrat polled 7 points higher than the latest horse race poll. And that is extremely significant. And what is also significant about this election, it further narrows the Republican majority. They can only lose, at this point, 2 votes to hold a majority vote. And moreover, Suozzi was able to turn around the immigration issue that Republicans have been beating Democrats with for such a long time. Donald Trump did himself in when he torpedoed the bipartisan border security bill without even seeing it. simply because it would give Biden a victory, he said, you got to vote against it. And that's exactly what happened among the Republicans, proving, as the Democratic campaign harped on, and I think will continue to harp on right through November, the Republicans, Trump and company, do not want to solve the border. They want to keep the border in chaos in order cynically to use that as a weapon against Joe Biden, but they may in fact have stuffed their foot in their mouth when it comes to that. And by the way, border crossings are way down during the last month. And of course, in another, absurd political show, the Republicans, by one vote, 214 to 213, impeached the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security on the most thinnest of pretexts. No way they showed that he committed high crimes and misdemeanors, and the Senate will dispose of this bogus impeachment in very short order. So another thing about the New York election, as I said, the Democrats polled 7 points over the horse race poll. This is typical. If you look at the off-year elections in 2023 in places like Kansas, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, look at this election. It was just another election in Pennsylvania in the House that gave Democrats control of the state House. Democrats are consistently, when it comes to actual voting and not the horse race polls, they are consistently getting 5 to 6 points above what the polls say they should get. Another reason, as I've said so many times, to take the polls and throw them into the fireplace. But there's more news, right, Sam?
I guess so. You tell me.
Well, Georgia.
Georgia's
on. Don't ask me to sing.
No, go ahead. Let's hear it.
No, we'd lose our entire audience.
Right. Good point. Good point.
In junior high school, I was a designated listener.
Right.
He never allowed me to sing a word.
Right.
At any rate, some of those charged in the RICO indictment brought by Fulton County, Georgia DA Fani Willis has claimed that she should be disqualified because of an improper personal sexual relationship with the special prosecutor that she appointed in the case. And they held a hearing on that today. And the hearing was an absolute farce. Surprisingly, Willis herself testified, an amazing spectacle. And they did not lay a glove on her. The judge kept saying, they wanted to bring up all these supposed salacious details about this consensual adult relationship. And the judge wasn't interested. The judge wanted to know whether or not there was a conflict of interest here. For example, that Willis financially benefited from this appointment. And they had absolutely not a shred of evidence to demonstrate that. My prediction is that the judge will not disqualify Fani Willis. The case will go on unless something extraordinary happens when they extend the hearing tomorrow. Last thing I want to talk about is Trump's attempt to delay.
I have a question.
Yes.
But isn't there something to be said about how Fani Willis has really fumbled her duty in this? I mean, yeah, they didn't lay a glove on her. Yeah, she'll probably continue. But she made some pretty big glaring mistakes, no?
I agree. The optics are really, really bad. She should never have hired him, although she claims she only started an intimate relationship with him after she had hired him. By the way, he was not the first choice. Others turned her down before she turned to Wade as the special.
Right, but she probably should just avoid romantic relationships in the midst of a trial against the president of the United States. You know what I mean?
Terrible blunder. I don't think it's going to disqualify her, but it certainly was, as you say, quite accurately, a very, very bad stumble. Because when bring a case against the president of the United States and 17 or 18 other individuals, you should stay as squeaky clean as you possibly can. Avoid intimate relationships with someone who works for you. You should do that generally, but especially in something as high profile as this. So I give Fani Willis an F for the optics of all of this.
The professor grades. Professor gives his grade. It's officially an F.
Right, but I also give the attorneys for the defendants who challenged her an F. They were awful. They were miserable. They kept wanting to bring up these irrelevant, salacious details. They kept asking the same questions over and over again. They kept trying the patience of the judge. Donald Trump constantly and his allies seem to be scraping the bottom of the barrel for lawyers, maybe because Trump is known for stiffing everyone who works for him. The other thing that's so ironic here, Trump is now handpicking a new chair for the Republican National Committee, another former election denier, Mr. Whatley from North Carolina, and Laura Trump, his daughter-in-law, as co-chair. And Laura has said, oh, we're going to give all the money that we collect to Donald Trump. And what is Donald Trump doing with the money that's been collected, Sam?
I'm assuming paying his legal bills.
Paying his legal bills. So you have all of these, ordinary folks who are scraping by, giving their hard-earned money to a billionaire to pay his legal bills, and then they're running and screaming about the high price of tomatoes. It's just an extraordinary situation that we're seeing here. And the other big news is the January 6th case brought by
I'm feeling dizzy with all these cases and things. It's
I know.
I can't keep it all. I can't keep it all.
It boggles the mind. It boggles the mind. But, when you've got someone like Donald Trump, it's not a big surprise. So what Trump is really good at is delay to avoid accountability. This goes all the way back to early 1970s when he was found by the Department of Justice to be violating the fair housing laws by discriminating against minorities in his real estate company in New York City. And he just delayed, obstructed until the case faded away. That's what he's hoping to do in all of these cases. Well, it didn't work in New York so far, and he has succeeded in delaying the January 6th case with his absurd claim that he's immune from any criminal acts that he might commit as president. His lawyer even said he can order Team SEAL 6 to assassinate all his political opponents, and unless he is impeached and convicted by the Senate, he has total immunity. Of course, he could just avoid conviction in the Senate. He could shoot all the senators, and according to his lawyers, he would not be criminal liable for anything. Well, the trial judge, in the strongest possible terms, shot that down. Then a 3-judge panel, 2 Democratic appointees, 1 conservative appointee, in equally strong terms, panel of the DC Circuit Court, the highest circuit court that is, shot it down. And of course, Trump then appealed to the Supreme Court. And just today, I believe, Jack Smith responded in very strong terms to Donald Trump's brief. So this could go a number of ways. Supreme Court could impose a stay, in which case the trial is postponed until the Supreme Court acts. It could not impose a stay, in which case the trial continues. It could ultimately not decide to intervene and just leave the Court of Appeals opinion as it is. Or it could decide to intervene and put it on a rocket docket. In the case of Bush versus Gore that decided the 2000 election, the Supreme Court moved with lightning speed, decided the case just in a matter of days. Or it could delay everything again by slow walking the case and not issuing an opinion until many months hence.
I sort of think that all these cases against Trump there's too many, and they're starting to confuse people, and I think people are starting to care less and less and less. They can't even keep track of which way is up in all this,
I know. And, that's not the fault of anyone but Trump. He's accused of doing these things. Trump always says Trump never takes responsibility for anything, even though the tradition of American conservatism is personal morality, personal responsibility. Trump, of course, has trashed both of that. So it's always someone else's fault. Joe Biden, the prosecutor, or their favorite whipping boy. Who's that? The Jewish Holocaust survivor.
George Soros.
Somehow George Soros, is behind all this. Or maybe now it's Taylor Swift who's engaged in some conspiracy.
Oh, that's who it is.
Oh, to get Donald Trump. But he is accused of doing these things, and the cases are all incredibly strong. We know what he did. He does his crimes out in the open. We have the January 6th committee meticulously documenting his crimes. It's nobody's fault but his own. And I think you're right. It's all very confusing and people might get tired. But once a trial takes place, then I think people's attention will be riveted. And again, do not, prosecutors, drag out the New York trial for 6 weeks. That's absurd. You can try it in a matter of a very few days. The evidence is overwhelming, and I have no idea what Donald Trump's defense might be.
To all the prosecutors watching, you heard him. They're certainly here right now. There's 197 people watching. One of them is in here for sure, right, Dad?
I hope so, and I know I'm absolutely right about this. Right. Prosecutors love to drag things out, and that's an enormous mistake in this case, particularly with such a high-profile defendant as Donald Trump.
You want to get to some questions, Pops?
I'm always ready for questions.
Thank you, Blake Grisham, for becoming a member. Thank you to Bradley Mustaine for gifting a membership. You can gift memberships too. I don't know if people know that.
Wow, you can gift memberships and directly donate. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, UV Lighting got a free membership from Bradley Mustaine. Thank you, Bradley. All right, let's get to some questions here.
We'll start with members.
Well, I just go through chronologically usually, and just
I'll answer every question. Don't worry. Have I ever not?
Yeah, sometimes you pass on questions.
Very rarely. Only if they're about the opera.
Right. Elemental Bot wants to know, did you hear about the ex-informant who was indicted for lying about the Bidens?
I did see a headline on it. I didn't see the details of the story, but I'm not a bit surprised. The MO of Biden's critics have been to lie. This notion that Biden fired this prosecutor in Ukraine way back when he was vice president to protect his son. The opposite is true. This prosecutor was corrupt and wasn't prosecuting, and Biden was carrying out the policy of the United States government, the European Union, and the anti-corruption forces in Ukraine. This whole attempt to pin something on Biden has been based on lies from the very beginning, and I am by no means surprised that someone involved in this is now being indicted for lying.
Member Jack Tioli says, "Hi, Professor. I was curious about what the keys looked like for the election of 1960 when you were 46 years old."
1960, I was 13. I don't think I was back then.
Sorry, got confused.
I actually didn't start predicting until 1982. So, as old as I am, I did not predict in 1960.
I thought that would be a good opportunity to joke on you a little bit. One of our many presidents...
You never hesitate to do that, do you?
No. One of our many presidents, President Belichick, says, don't they have to prove that Trump falsified the records to cover up another crime?
Absolutely. And they have the checks. You see them on television. You have these checks signed by Donald Trump to Michael Cohen for legal services. Michael Cohen performed no legal services. There were no legal services, no business involved. It was $130,000 that he paid out to silence Stormy Daniels, and then Donald Trump reimbursed him, disguising it as a business expense. You don't sign checks by accident. And it's not just one, it's a whole series of checks. And by the way, Michael Cohen went to jail for this fraud. And do you think for one moment Michael Cohen did it on his own and not at the direction of Donald Trump? If you believe that, I have a really big bridge in my hometown of Brooklyn I'd love to sell you.
The Brooklyn Bridge? I'll take it. I'll take it.
You'll take it.
Yeah.
I'll give it to you bargain. $999.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
Donis Giorgio says, do you think Trump is in trouble?
I think Trump is in deep trouble. I have no doubt that he is going to be convicted in the March 25th trial for falsifying and deceiving America. I don't know if he'll be sentenced to prison. He could be. The counts add up to as much as 4 years in prison. And if you look at some of the exit polls from Iowa and New Hampshire, a big chunk of diehard Republicans have said, if Donald Trump is convicted of a felony, and all these are felony counts, they're not misdemeanors in New York, he is not fit to serve as president. And I do believe that the January 6th trial will take place before the election. You know, as serious as the election fraud trial in New York is, the January 6th trial is even more serious. And I believe he'll be convicted of that as well.
David Albine says, this is the best show to watch on Thursday nights. Thank you, David. We appreciate that.
How about on Wednesday nights? Is it even better than what's on Wednesday nights?
I don't know. I don't know what's on Wednesday nights. The Alex Treefire says, could Trump be convicted long before the general election?
Absolutely. The trial in New York is scheduled for March 25th. Even if the prosecutors are foolish enough to drag it out for a month or a month and a half, which, as I said, would be a true mistake, trial will be over long before the general election. And I don't see a scenario where he escapes conviction. As I said, I have no idea what his defense may be. All the things he's talked about up to now won't even be admitted in court.
Captain N90s, one of our many members, asks, should the Democrats...
Captain, too.
And a captain. Should the Democrats be worried about Larry Hogan running for Senate in Maryland?
Absolutely, yes. Up until Larry Hogan running, that was a sure win for Democrats. But Larry Hogan is kind of an anomaly among Republicans. He's a very moderate Republican. He won big in his elections for governor in Maryland. And I think he will be a very serious and very formidable candidate. You know, I think this race goes from strong Democrat to at best lean Democrat, and maybe even toss up with Larry Hogan in the mix. Yes, this is something Democrats should have to worry about a lot. And it also means they're going to have to divert a lot of resources to Maryland, something they haven't had to do in a Senate race in decades. But now they're going to have to worry about Maryland, something they thought, rightly so, up until a few days ago, was in the bag for them.
I don't like ass. Why do you think they're dealing with hush money payments right now instead of when he was in office? Do you think there is ticket splitting in presidential races? For example, you see Trump and Brown win. Those are two different questions.
The first question was why they're dealing with hush money payments before he was in office. Because
no. Why are they dealing with hush money payments now instead of when he was in office?
I think they should have done it earlier. I don't know why they've delayed on this. I don't have an inside pipeline to the DA. You did have a transition from one DA to another in Manhattan, and that might have delayed the case. I do think, as a generic matter, one of the great tragedies that we're seeing unfolding right before our eyes is the foot dragging, not just on the part of the New York prosecutor, but most critically on the part of the Department of Justice. I have always loved Merrick Garland. I've known him since the 1960s. We were both part of the debate mafia of those days. And he was maybe the best federal judge on an appeals court in the country, chief judge of the most important court of appeals, the DC Court of Appeals. But he is a miserable attorney general, an absolutely wrong pick. He seems so concerned with not appearing political that he just hasn't acted in a timely fashion. All that's going on with January 6th, for example, should have been last year, but he diddled for a year before appointing a special prosecutor in the case for no reason, since these crimes occurred in 2020 and 2021. And, if in fact the January 6th case does not come to trial, some really strong fingers of blame have to be pointed at Merrick Garland, the wrong guy to be Attorney General. As much as I love him.
I'm pointing my finger at him for you, Dad.
The big finger of blame.
The big finger of blame. Given the Mayorkas impeachment circus, how likely is the MAGA goons in the House of Representatives going to pull the same stunt against Biden?
They want to. They love to do it. But at least in the Mayorkas case, as bogus as it was, they had something, the crisis at the border, which they claimed he was criminally negligent in dealing with, utterly bogus, but at least there's something there. When it comes to Biden, there is no there. They've been looking at this for years. Even Donald Trump's loyalist Attorney General, Bill Barr, looked at it and couldn't find anything. And now that this so-called whistleblower has been indicted for lying about alleged wrongdoing by Joe Biden, that makes it even way more difficult to impeach. And, with the victory in New York 3, their majority has shrunk even more. 3 Republicans voted against the Mayorkas impeachment. I suspect there'll be more than 3 who would be opposed to a bogus impeachment of Joe Biden, which I don't think even politically will help the Republicans. It'll just make Biden look like a more sympathetic figure. And by the way, I haven't had a chance yet to comment on the outrageous, egregious special counsel report. He had no business making gratuitous comments about Joe Biden's memory, Joe Biden's mental acuity. He certainly could have given reasons why he didn't bring the case, very ample reasons based on the facts, not on his speculations about Biden. He's not a medical professional. Absolutely disgraceful and gratuitous. It harkens back to another outrageous, disgraceful episode, James Comey going after Hillary Clinton in 2016, even though, as in the Biden case, they decided that there was no criminal wrongdoing. By the way, there was also a special counsel who investigated Mike Pence's retention of classified documents. And why don't you hear anything about that? Because quite properly, he submitted a one-page report, basically just saying, there's nothing indictable here, end of story. And by the way, get that finger of blame out again. Once again, the chicken-hearted Attorney General is implicated in all of this because it just came out that before the report was released, the Biden attorneys vigorously objected to the gratuitous remarks about Joe Biden's mental fitness. It fell on deaf ears for Merrick Garland, who had control over the report, could have removed it, could have not released the report, and instead, Garland just let it happen again.
Formetta What donated $5. Thank you. But I think we covered her question. She said, "What do you think about the Trump court date? How will it impact him?" I think we covered that pretty well. RBC wants to know, what do you think Ukraine aid? Do you think Ukraine aid will pass Congress ultimately?
Boy, that's a really tough question. Republicans used to be the staunchest anti-Soviet, anti-Russian, anti-authoritarian force in the United States. But since the advent of Donald Trump, they've turned 180 degrees around that. They seem to embrace dictators like Vladimir Putin and not concerned with his attack on democratic nations. And we've seen the ultimate expression of that just a few days ago when Donald Trump not only threatened not to support NATO members who, quote unquote, were supposedly delinquent, but actually encouraged Putin to attack them. And by the way, NATO is not a dues-paying membership. There are no delinquent members. There's only voluntary guidelines, and most members actually meet them. So, it's just reprehensible what the Republicans are doing with respect to Ukraine and collective security that's kept the West safe for 75 years. But, there just may be enough Republicans who still hew to the old traditions of the party to somehow get this for a positive vote in the House.
The Smoking Cat asked, does Nikki Haley continuing to stay in the race help or hurt Trump?
Probably neither. She's virtually a non-factor because, Trump is just overwhelming her in the primary. So why is she still in? Number one, she hopes to be the nominee in 2028. There is a tradition within the Republican Party of candidates running unsuccessfully once and then the next time being nominated for president. John McCain is an example, and Mitt Romney is another example. The other reason she's in the race is this scenario that I've mentioned before that's far-fetched, but not impossible. If Trump gets convicted of multiple felonies, the convention or maybe even the committee, although he seems to be putting his stooges on the committee, could decide we can't run with a convicted felon, and then Nikki Haley would hope they turn to her. Very, very remote scenario.
Chevy Hawk asks, since Donald Trump claims he's being unjustly accused in all of his court cases, why hasn't he had any countersuits?
Because he knows he's not being unjustly accused. The publicly available evidence is overwhelming. We know about the payments to Stormy Daniels. We have the checks. We know Michael Cohen was convicted of that. With respect to the January 6th case, the January 6th committee in the House meticulously documented all the ways in which Donald Trump was trying to impede the peaceful transfer of power. And I know the prosecutors have more than just what is publicly available. So there's absolutely no basis other than Trump blustering to challenge any of these indictments. Of course, Trump claims he's done nothing wrong. Well, if you've done nothing wrong, you would think you want speedy trials and be vindicated. The fact that his whole strategy is nothing but delay really undermines his claim that he's done nothing wrong.
Sean P. asks, why do you think the founders chose the vice president rather than the Speaker of the House to preside over Electoral College or electoral vote counts for president?
Well, I think because Speaker of the House or the President pro tem of the Senate, Speaker of the House just elected from one district. Senator is elected from one state. The vice president, of course, represents the entire country. And while I, can't go back in time, and yes, as old as I am, I did not know the founding framers.
Yes, you did. Don't lie. You did.
Okay, I know a
did.
few of them.
Okay.
Yeah. Alexander Hamilton, until he was shot, and I were good friends. So I think because of the national office of the vice president, that would be my guess. That's why they picked the vice president. And by the way, back in those days, when they framed the original Constitution, you didn't have tickets. That didn't occur until the 12th Amendment in 1803, after the tie in 1800. But back when they were framing the Constitution in 1787, the vice president was the second highest vote getter in the Electoral College.
Mike DeNicola asks, how do you think the scandal key looks now that the informant was indicted for lying to the FBI and arrested him, seemingly heavily damaging the Biden impeachment probe?
I completely agree with that. I think the scandal key was going nowhere even before that. Remember, for the scandal key to turn, there's got to be at least some bipartisan recognition of scandal. Back during the Clinton impeachment, Democrats voted to acquit him in the Senate, but a lot of Democrats said, boy, what you did was really wrong. Admitted, a real problem with the Clinton administration. No Democrats have, chipped into the Republicans' bogus attempt to pin a scandal on Biden. And this indictment just drives a spike right through everything the Republicans are trying to do. That may not stop them, but it certainly, makes them, as incredible as they were to start, even more incredible.
Blake Gershom asks, immigration can hurt Biden's election chances more than anything, age included. Should Biden use executive privilege on the border at all rather than only running on the GOP hypocrisy?
Well, I think he should not just run on the GOP hypocrisy, although that's important. He's got to run on the fact that with his support, the Senate reached a bipartisan agreement on border security. It would have been the first major law on immigration or the border in many, many decades. And Donald Trump spiked it even before he saw it, because he doesn't want to solve the border, he just wants chaos. So Biden's got to campaign in the fact that Democrats, with his support and with bipartisan agreement, actually had an answer, at least in significant part, to the problems of the border. Republicans have no answer other than obstructionism. That worked real well for Suozzi in the special election in New York, where he won going away. And I think, will diffuse the immigration issue between now and November. Republicans have proven to be their own worst enemies when it comes now to immigration, which had been a great issue for them and now isn't nearly as good an issue. And meanwhile, the issue of democracy and the issue of abortion rights remain very strong for Democrats.
Thank you, Bradley Mustaine, for becoming a member. Theo Meal wants to know if we're going to do an informal, non-keys-based prediction of the electoral map and House and Senate close to Election Day. What do you think, Dad?
Of course. And, stay tuned. I've not made a call yet, although some of the news reports, and there have been lots of them about the keys, have headlined that, even though the stories quite accurately say I haven't made a prediction yet. But we will give you an update. Stay tuned in a future live show, not too far into the distant future. It won't be a final prediction, but it will give all of you a unique, special insight into the keys.
Plane, Boats, and Submarine says, what percentage do you think Trump will win the GOP by?
Oh,
a lot of percentage, a high percentage.
More. Yeah.
Alex Treefire says,
any serious opposition.
Speaking of Michael Cohen, we talked about him earlier in the episode. Has he invited? An AU grad.
Although I don't think he was in any of my classes.
I don't think so. Has he invited you to the Mea Culpa podcast? Have you been?
No, not that I know of. Even though he is a former AU, if he'd been in one of my classes, he probably would have learned enough to stay away from Donald Trump in the first place.
That's a good point. President Belichick says, back to the hush money payments, falsifying business records isn't a felony unless it was in furtherance of another crime. So are they covering up campaign finance violations?
The other crimes, and I'm not sure I have all of them, but he's mentioned quite a few in his indictment, but certainly covering up violation of New York State election law and covering up violations of federal election laws are two of the serious crimes related to the falsification of business records, which makes this a felony trial rather than a misdemeanor trial. And there are a couple of others, and I don't exactly recall them.
Serious question. If Trump's convicted, civil war, question mark?
Absolutely not.
No.
Trump would love for you to believe that. Do something to me, he said there'll be bedlam, bad things will happen. He called for supporters to demonstrate, at his indictments. And what happened, Sam? Did he get big crowds of protesters?
Just you and me.
Yeah, pretty much you and me. And who's been absent at all of these indictments? Someone real close to Trump?
His family? I don't know.
Yeah, his wife.
Oh.
And now, Trump knows no shame. Now he's attacked Nikki Haley because her husband hasn't joined her. And do you know why he hasn't joined her?
Isn't he in active duty?
He's in active duty. He's deployed. Trump claims to be the great supporter of the military, but he loves to denigrate the military, like he did with John McCain or the Gold Star families. And now, with his wife never showing up, he's attacked Nikki Haley for her husband not showing up when he's deployed in active duty. Amazing.
Adam Miran says, do you think with Trump in trouble, will this help Biden win the election? And will the economy key help Biden win the election? And happy TGIT. Thank God it's Thursday. I think that's what that means.
I love it. I love it. Remember, there is no key. Only one key for the challenger, and that's whether the challenger is not the once-in-a-generation inspirational candidate. And I've explained why Trump has already lost that, because he just appeals to a narrow base. He's not broadly appealing like Franklin Roosevelt or Ronald Reagan. In fact, he's never won the popular vote in 2 elections. Now, if he's convicted of crimes, that's outside the keys. And, the keys are based on history. You haven't given me a crystal ball yet, Sam, or instructions on how to communicate upstairs. They're very robust. They go all the way back to 1860 and forward since 1984. But there can be such catastrophic events that can affect an election outside the scope of the keys, and multiple felony convictions for Donald Trump could do that. He's still able to run. You're not disqualified from running if you're a convicted felon, but boy, that's a pretty heavy ball and chain, to use a proper metaphor.
If Trump's convicted and sent to prison, do you think RNC will remove him and replace him with Nikki Haley? I think we've talked about that before. You said no.
Yeah, he stacked the RNC with his stooges. I think that's going to be very difficult. I doubt if he'd be serving a prison term before the election. He might be sentenced to prison, but I'm sure he'll appeal and delay and probably not be in prison before the election, although it's remotely possible.
Do you think that
Remember, do you know who ran from prison for president?
Eugene Debs.
You got it. Eugene Victor Debs in 1920, who, by the way, was convicted under the Espionage Act. One of the charges against Donald Trump is violation of the Espionage Act. And Trump's alleged violation, retaining and loosely dealing with national security documents, is far more serious than Debs's conviction, which basically involves speaking out against World War I. He was a socialist, and he actually got pardoned after the election by the newly elected conservative Republican president. You know who that was, who got elected in 1920?
Who got elected in 1920? Give me a
big
second.
Womanizer.
Big womanizer? I don't know.
Yes. Warren G. Harding.
I would have never got that. Never.
Well, he died, a few years into his term in the middle of the great Teapot Dome scandal. Not too highly rated today. But he did pardon Debs.
Do you think that Biden will cave to the reports that he should bow out of the presidential election?
Only if he wants to hand the election to the Republicans. I've said this repeatedly. I'll say it again. Biden running, you win the incumbency key and the contest key. 6 more of the 11 remaining keys would have to fall. He drops out. They lose the incumbency key, obviously. They lose the contest key because there's no heir apparent. That means only 4 more keys would have to fall. And by the way, there's this great myth, that there's some big Democrat up there in the sky who could just appoint a replacement for Joe Biden. It doesn't work that way. The voters choose the nominee. And by the way, if Biden steps aside, they could choose Bernie Sanders, who's almost as old as Joe Biden. He's actually the most prominent next Democrat.
Patrick Murray asks, what is your opinion on the BDS movement in America? Is it anti-Semitic? I don't even know what that is. Do you?
I don't know what that is either.
I don't know what that is. If Trump is convicted and sent to prison, we just answered that.
Let me say, did he tell you what it is?
No, they just said BDS. Patrick?
I don't know. But I will say,
what's BDS?
Anti-Semitism is on the rise. It's a huge problem in this country, and maybe something we'll address in a future live.
So I gotta ban somebody real quick. All right. It's an anti-Israel movement that boycotts Israel ideas and products. I've never heard of it.
I hate to comment on a movement I haven't studied, but there's certainly a fair chance that a movement to boycott Israel has elements of anti-Semitism in it.
Guy 2015, we've answered that question about using the keys for governors or senates or stuff like that before, so I would check out past episodes. Basically, it doesn't work as well. Did you catch The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, Dad? He doesn't really watch TV.
I don't watch TV.
You think that the Supreme Court will come back with a quick decision, I guess, in terms of the immunity or the disqualification?
In terms of the disqualification under Section 3? Yes,
yeah.
I do think. Is that what they're asking? Not the immunity.
I don't know. They just said, will the Supreme Court, this is Terry Green. So Terry, if you want to clarify, they just say, will the Supreme Court come back with a quick decision? Terry, what are you thinking?
I'll talk about both. It's okay.
Okay.
On the disqualification, they have to come back with a quick decision because ballots, have to be printed and distributed, and there are pending cases in other states. On the immunity, I think I went through all of the various scenarios, some quick, some dragged out. And if I had to guess, I don't think the court will take the immunity case. It's a no-win for them. If they decide for Trump, they'll just look like a bunch of party hacks. If they decide the other way, they're just affirming what the Court of Appeals has already done. And they will absolutely antagonize the entire MAGA movement.
You called them maggots. That's funny.
Little Freudian slip there.
Thank you, Just Dini, for the $2 donation. Bradley Mustaine says, do you think the special election in New York was a preview for the general election in November?
Well, it's one district, and it's a special election, so you can't linearly extrapolate from that one election to November. But I do think it has some lessons for November. One, forget the polls. When it comes to actual voting, Democrats, not just in this election, but consistently have way outperformed the polls. Secondly, as I explained, it's an important suburban swing district. But as we all know, ultimately, it's going to be the keys that tell you what the likely outcome is going to be in November, not a special election.
We got a $50 donation from our benefactor, Derek Taylor. Thank you, Derek Taylor. They say, the DNC has a plan B if Joe Biden decides not to run for re-election. During the Democratic convention, the party will have the delegates go up for grabs from competing candidates. Can the Democratic Party still win if this happens?
It's going to be very hard for the Democratic Party to win if that happens, because it'll mean there'll be a huge fight at the convention, a huge, miserable, awful fight. So they'll lose the incumbency key and the party battle key. That will vastly diminish Democratic prospects to win. Again, it's another reason why you can't trust the pundits who are saying, oh, we need to replace Biden, we need someone else. That is sports talk radio. It's off the top of the head punditry, not based on any real understanding of how American presidential elections actually work.
The Alex Tree Fire with a $10 donation. They say, my only hope for us beating Hogan is if voters realize even the most moderate of Republicans won't concede sometimes. That's what happened in Virginia's 16th Senate district last year.
Right. And the very important thing is Hogan will caucus with the Republicans, and control of the Senate is absolutely critical because the Senate confirms appointees, cabinet members, generals, ambassadors, and most critically, every single lifetime federal judge. So Democrats have to realize you may like Hogan, but if he gets in the Senate, it's going to run counter to all of your values.
If the war in Gaza does not de-escalate beyond the border, if the war in Gaza does not escalate beyond the borders of Palestine and does not result in further U.S. casualties, might Biden still lose the foreign failure key due to the war?
Well, I don't like to speculate without knowing exactly, what the situation is. So I'm not going to speculate on that. But let's not also forget there's a war in Ukraine, which could hold the balance of the foreign policy success and failure keys, which I have not called to this point.
Ben, I think we answered your question in a previous answer. Let's see here. Has there been a POTUS who was hated while in office but thought to be great now, and vice versa?
Oh, absolutely. Harry Truman was reviled while he was in office, and over time there was substantial revisionism of the Truman presidency, with a lot of authorities claiming not a great president, but a near great president. Eisenhower wasn't hated, but there was a lot of criticism of Eisenhower that he was detached, he wasn't in charge, he was more concerned, get this, about playing golf. But ever since the publication of Greenstein's Hidden Hand Presidency, that Eisenhower was actually very much in control, mostly behind the scenes, there has also been a reevaluation of the Eisenhower presidency.
If you could add 3 amendments to the Constitution, what would you add?
3 amendments to the Constitution?
Yeah.
We'll have to save that for the next show. I'm not going to give an off the top of my head answer to that. It's too serious.
That's a hard one.
Yeah.
How's the 2024 13 Keys book coming along?
It should be out in July. I'm working on it as we speak.
That's pretty good, Dad.
Yeah.
All right. I think
it's now the 8th edition, something like that. Not many books go through 8 editions.
All right. I think we're going to start wrapping up here. But I want to let people know, actually, I'm going to go live after this stream on my own personal YouTube channel. So if people want to come and hang out and just continue to chat, it's going to be a lot less formal than this and probably won't include much politics. But people can jump over to my channel. I'll put the link in the chat here. Give me 1 second. And I'll if you want to, I just posted it in here. So if you want to come and hang out for a little bit with me, I'm gonna pin it. You can do it. You can do it. Let's see here if we have any more things.
I can take couple more questions, and then you can take over. You're young and sharp.
Yeah. If any more questions? Okay. Daniel DeMarcus really wants us to answer his question. If Trump loses the keys, and for argument there isn't voter suppression / Russian interference, and Trump still wins, would it be the failure of the keys or the Electoral College doesn't represent America?
Well, I'll answer the second one first because that's easy. The Electoral College does not represent America. Remember, Republicans have only won the popular vote for president once since 1992. Do you know when that was, Sam?
George Bush's second election.
Correct.
Let's go.
See, you better tune into his show. 2004. Electoral College greatly overrepresents small states and underrepresents large states. So by no means is it representative of the country. Now, if in fact voter suppression and foreign interference, despite the keys, lead to a Trump victory, as I said, keys are based on history. It's always possible that some cataclysmic events could upset the system, but it's been good for 40 years, and no other system has anything close to that kind of a track record. Take one more question.
All right, Ross Goldberg asks, is it very concerning that Biden hasn't been doing enough interviews and campaigning? Does he need to campaign and get out there more in order to help secure enough of the performance keys?
I think he should get out there, at least leaving aside from the keys. One of the lessons of the keys is campaign on substance and vision. So you have a mandate if you win. And if you lose, you'll at least have made your mark on the country. And Biden needs to build a mandate for a second term. FDR in 1944 was also decried, although he wasn't especially old. They said he was, he had polio, he was sick. And what did he do? Late in the campaign, he launched a vigorous multi-state kind of campaign. I think if Biden's up to it, and I'm not a medical professional, I do not comment on age and health, he should do something like that to get the message out and build a mandate. Thank you all. Join as members, donate. We need your help.
That is true, sir.
And hang with Sam if you want.
The Alex Treefire says, I officially predict us Dems to take back the House of Representatives but lose the Senate. Do you agree?
No, okay. I don't. I think they're both up for grabs.
All right. With that, I think we're going to start saying goodbye. Again, if you want to come into it's going to take me a second to switch everything and get ready. So hang in tight. But the link is pinned at the top if you want to keep chatting. Any final words to the people out there, Dad? Wait, we have one more donation that I don't think we answered. Planes, boats, and submarines. I see your donation, but I don't understand your question. I'm sorry. So maybe next week you can try to clarify it. Any final words to the people, Dad?
Well, as I said, join as members, donate, hang with Sam. And my message to all of you is don't underestimate the election fraud case. It's not the hush money case. It's the election fraud case that's coming up in March 25th. And if you know any prosecutors, know anyone in the New York
knows
office,
the prosecutors.
tell them to make it short and sweet. Good night.
Good night. Dad, no